And welcome back to Good Day Columbia. Yesterday, the nation and the world honored the life and legacy of slain civil rights giant Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He touched many lives, especially those close to him, prompting them to make a change. Joining me now on Good Day Columbia is civil rights pioneer himself and someone who worked alongside Dr. King is the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend, thank you so much for being here this morning.
To you, sir.
Such a pleasure. Reverend, yesterday was the first day that the nation got a chance to celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday with his monument in Washington, D.C. Give us your reaction to that. Is that the best way?
Well, in many ways, we try to concretize his significance and his achievements. But Dr. King is the founding father of the New South, the godfather of the New South. Because when I grew up here in Greenville, South Carolina, at Sterling High, I couldn't apply to attend USC or Clemson. So when Clemson and USC plays the big ball game where it's black and white together, and you're choosing uniform color over skin color and direction over complexion, that's the Dr. King South. That's the South that Thurman and Goldwater and Reagan resisted. When Alabama plays LSU, that's the Dr. King Bowl. All these, from Michelin down to Boeing, all that Southern development, because of Dr. King's vision of a New South. Because you could not get those companies to come behind the cotton curtain. You couldn't have had the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons behind the cotton curtain. You couldn't have had Boeing and Michelin behind the cotton curtain and Toyota in Mississippi. So when the cotton curtain came down, you could have the Olympics in Atlanta. He was the transformer that made America better for all of us.
You had an opportunity to work alongside this transformer. You were actually there at the Lorraine Hotel when he was gunned down. Is this still fresh in your mind?
Well, every time I think about Memphis, it remains so traumatic. And yet, he challenged us to not let one bullet kill a whole movement. So we move on, and today we focus on something called poverty. I stayed in a homeless shelter the night before last in commemoration of his last birth date. He convened us in Atlanta, Georgia, whites from Appalachia, some African Americans, some Latino Americans, some Native Americans, some Jewish Americans, on how to end poverty as we know it. In South Carolina today, 25% of all children are in poverty. And yet the campaign ads are attacking each other, but none of them are attacking poverty, which is bad for your health and bad for your life options. I mean, today, 53 million Americans are food insecure, 50 million are in poverty, 44 million are on food stamps, 25 million are unemployed, and yet we're continuously giving more and more to the rich, fewer and fewer. Those on the top of the deck are getting breaks. Those on the hull of the ship are sucking up water. And so too few got too much, too many are in poverty, and we're losing so much money on unnecessary wars. We spent $1 to $3 trillion on Iraq. What could $1 trillion do today? Wipe out every state budget deficit, rehire teachers, policemen, firemen, begin to build houses again. So he was about the mission of civil rights for all, but also economic justice and shared insecurity.
What would Dr. King say about the Occupy movement if he were alive today, with everyone talking about fighting for justice and corporate greed? What would Dr. King say about the Occupy movement?
He would embrace it. His last campaign was a poor people's campaign, to go to Washington to occupy them all and set up Resurrection City, which I became mayor, and to address the inequality gap. The gap between black and white is closed, but the gap between have and have not. The 4 million plus Americans who face home foreclosure, the wealth gap, the health gap. The poorest people are facing high infant mortality rates, shorter life expectancy. So he would be about that movement because too few got too much. We bail out the banks, not linked to lending, not to reinvestment. Gotcha. We bail out the insurance companies, and so they maintain their monopolies. Insurance fees have risen, the cost of medicine has risen, and the number of sick people have risen. People lying about outside the hospitals can't get in because they're sick. So somehow I hope these campaigns, now the Voting Rights Act has been threatened in South Carolina. The Voting Rights Act is being challenged, and the Department of Justice has said this South Carolina version does not meet standards. The immigration policy does not meet standards. And it's amazing how we embrace Jesus, don't embrace the poor. Born on the death warrant, born poor, born a minority, became an immigrant, became a refugee. Somehow we choose Santa Claus theology rather than the historical Jesus who, out of the poor side, I'm anointed to preach the gospel, the good news to the poor. So somehow poverty must fit into our very church life. Our very soul must address the issue of poverty, illiteracy, and disease.
And for the final question, Rev, politics, we know it's taking place elections. Do you believe that President Obama will be a second-term president?
He stands a good chance of returning because he's done a good job. When we came in office, we were facing 800,000 jobs lost a month. He stopped that hemorrhage. Now there's a slow recovery. His winning was a redemptive moment for America. It took us beyond the historical, ancient fears about race that made us in assumptions about the nation. More Americans are insured, for example. More children are being fed, for example. And more our troops are home out of Iraq, for example. So if the issue is stopping the hemorrhaging of jobs, if the issue is coming out of Iraq, if the issue is begin to address the issues of poverty, then he deserves another extension, a chance.
Reverend Jackson, thank you so much for stopping by. And also, he will be at the Benedict College today at 11 a.m. He will be at the Benjamin E. Mays Human Resources Center Arena, and it is open to the public. Reverend Jackson will be talking at the Martin Luther King Jr. event there, so bring the whole family to meet him, 11 o'clock at Benedict College.
About end war and end poverty.
Thank you so much, Rev.